there's certain things that you can do as the doctor that only you can do.
Right.
And you want to focus on those. I brought the people in too late. I should have done it earlier. But there's certain things on a level that you want a certain structure you can have. You may not need as many people as I have. There's a balance depending on your personality. Yes, there's that startup stage where you can do a lot, but sometimes just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I agree.
That's one part. And depending on your personality, it may not be allowing you to grow further because you may have stressors that you're dealing with. So for me, I waited too long. I got to, when I got past 2 practices and I wanted a third, that's when I started thinking about it.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Orthopreneurs podcast. I'm here today with somebody I really, really respect a ton. I've known him a little bit. I'm looking forward to getting to know him a whole lot better. And if you know him, you probably respect him and like him as well. Put your hands together. Give a warm Orthopreneurs welcome to Dr. Alfred Jackson. Welcome, Alfred.
Thank you for having me, Glenn. I appreciate it. Feel like a big timer being on this with you. Thank you.
You know, I bring anybody on here, and if you're on here, you're a big timer in my heart. Because you mean something to me. And again, I remember, I think I met you in person for the first time. Tell me if I'm crazy. Way back when at a Stuart Frost in-office course, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. In Scottsdale or Mesa, Arizona, learning from the great Stuart Frost and getting some clinical pearls there. Yeah, that was the first time we met in person. It's hard because online you think you know people, you've known for, I know the guy for 15 years. Oh, actually, you ever met him? No. I met him one time. That's how it goes in the new orthodontic world.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I think we were talking to Trevor Nichols at one point, and I think he was going to meet, like, I think it was Brian Rochford. I forget who he was going to go meet, and like they'd known each other online, but they never met, right? And you know, you hear people say, "Oh, you're so much taller in person," or "You're so much bigger in person," or "You're so," and I always say that to Kyle. Because Kyle, when I met Kyle Fagala for the first time, I remember looking at him like, wow, you're really tall, dude. Like it's weird how you see people online. And so all we get a chance to see people usually online is in a 1-inch thumbnail or some video of them doing in their practice, right? And for me, that's one of the main reasons I started the whole Orthopreneurs Summit. I felt like we, harken back to something I think you're well familiar with, which was MKS, right? Back in the day, and again, I'll say the name out loud because I have no problem saying Ben Burris, but for Ben Burris, the state of today's orthodontic meetings wouldn't be the same. And he started MKS, and what it was back in the day, to me, was the best ortho meeting you could go to, right? When that one started to sort of go downhill for a whole number of reasons, that's when I started Orthopreneurs Summit, because I felt it's really important for us to come together at places other than, say, an AAO meeting, which, again, it's nice to bump into people you haven't seen in 20 years, but everybody goes their own way for lunch. Everybody goes their own way for dinner. Not everybody's doing the nighttime activities. And so you see somebody for 30 seconds. My whole goal is to bring people together, because the time I had with you at Stu's office, you're a great guy. I want to spend more time with you. And so, that was probably 5 years ago, maybe 5, 6.
Hey, it's pre-COVID. You can always date things by that.
Exactly.
So it was before that. But I agree with you. The meetings were great. What Ben did and what a lot of the other people did online to really start that community. Because as we all know, orthodontics, unless you have a partner, can be very lonely.
Oh, yeah.
You get out of residency. Residency's so fun. You have GORP and you have all these things. And then you get in your own practice. And first you have to learn that, oh, wait, I'm not that good as I thought. And then you're like, man, I guess it's just me. And then you start going through, and a lot of other people are dealing with the same things. And I let some of my best friends now through some of those meetings. And they're like, oh, how do you guys go to residency together? It's no, I met them at a conference, or we're having a drink, or we're walking on the beach talking about whatever else, the problems we have. One, you have that shared bond. You start to see that you also have very common problems as well. And that gives you some sense of like, we're in this together. And then you can unite together to really solve some of those problems together.
Yeah, exactly. And people have heard me say it over and over again. Nobody gets us like us, right? Like if you've been at a barbecue or a family get together or whatever it might be, and you've got friends there or family members who are attorneys or physicians or entrepreneurs or whatever it might be, they really don't understand at all that we are not only running a business like an entrepreneur, because we got to put on the marketing hat, but we're also the CEO generally, where we make decisions and we have to work and do all of this stuff next to the person who's the line worker. It's like the CEO of Ford going down to the shop floor and working, and saying, okay, now fix that part. Now go fix that part. And, and I'm not disparaging people because of level of education, but it is a very different world when you've got somebody who's gone to grade 23 next to somebody who finished high school and said that was a burden for them. And now you've got to have them implement the care that's in your head.
Yes.
And nobody gets us like us. And that's why getting together and having these conversations is so important, right?
Yeah, and depending on the practice size, you have to do that again and again with whatever 80 patients, or on to the next one and their parent, and again each day. And it can be daunting for some people depending on your personality. And I think that also, like you just mentioned, nobody else really understands. They don't really get it. Like my brother's a surgeon, so but I'm like, all your patients are asleep. Like you don't even know,
And there's no compliance involved.
No, they're out, and the anesthesiologist put them to sleep. You went in and did the work, and you're gone. They just know you as a set of good hands. So, it's a gift and a curse. I think we have the best profession in the world. I think for sure because of some of the things we just mentioned. But there's also unique challenges as well that go with some of those things. Like every coin has two sides.
I agree with you 100%. And by the way you spoke about your brother, I would love to be at that dinner table because I can already tell the two of you give it back and forth to each other really solid.
I'm a younger brother, so it always trickled down.
Yeah, but
So
the
it's
younger
always
brother's
like
always
that.
the pest. The younger
Yeah,
brother's
yeah,
always the
exactly.
pest. He's
Yeah.
always pushing the button to make the older brother crazy. But since you mentioned your family, I think you've got an amazing story. I'm privy to some of the details, and I typically will ask the question, right? Tell everybody, if you don't mind, how did you end up where you are? How did you end up doing what you're doing? And in your case, I think your family story is amazing. Like, there are stories you hear about people that are cool. There are stories you hear about people that are sad, right? You hear some sad stories from time to time when in this position. And then there are stories you hear that just like wake you up and smack you in the face and go, you got no right to make any excuses in your life. And I think your story is one of those. And so please, sorry for the big buildup here, but I think it's a great story. If you don't mind talking a little bit about how you ended up where you are to become an orthodontist, and your childhood and your upbringing and stuff like that, and then a little bit more about your practices, and we'll jump in there because I know your practice life is a little unique as well.
Yeah, I mean the whole growing up story. Obviously, as you're going through as a kid, you think it's just everybody is doing the same thing.
Right.
But I always say my mom and my grandmother are like super women, really. For at least in my life, my grandmother raised 10 kids, and and it was very rural Mississippi. So she raised each one of those children. They all ended up getting their college education,
Amazing.
and that was the 40s and the 50s. So a very unique time in the world then. And then my mother, she has me and my brother. She's a single parent. She decided to join the United States Air Force. So with that came obviously immediate structure. I think my uncle told her, "You got two boys by yourself. You can't live here. So you got to go join the military." So she did that. And amazingly, she became a lieutenant colonel. But with that,
That's
the
amazing.
military lifestyle, we moved K through 12. I went to 11 different schools during that time. So, pretty much every year, sometimes not even every year. I met a person that went to the same high school with them, same grade. They're like, I don't even remember. I was only there 6 months. They're like, oh, okay.
My gosh.
So we did that. But it was in hindsight, it was a gift and a curse being able to interact with that many people, see that many parts of the world, really, time in Germany and other places, and doing that with the three of us. And then my brother we already mentioned there, became a surgeon. And now I'm doing orthodontist. I dropped out the medical world. My mom's a nurse. So I didn't follow exactly in those footsteps, but close enough. But as we're going through, those are the people that I know and that I look up to and that have given me a solid background to allow me to do what I do now. But oftentimes I interact with other kids and they may say, well, you may have had it easy growing up. So I kind of give them a breakdown of what I went through, and it may touch them in a different way and allow us to connect as well. Say, your start is just a start. Wherever you go from there is up to you.
Yeah. And a lot of people define themselves by their start. And they just like, if you ever watched Married with Children back in the day, right? Al Bundy, right? He was always the college football player. Like, and he stayed the college football player for the rest of his life and it held him back, right? A fictional character. But it's important to recognize what your mom did yeah, there's going to be people out there who are going to rationalize it. Well, she was in the military. There's tons of organizational support. Single mom raising two boys. One becomes a surgeon. One becomes an orthodontist. That's solid, man. Coming from rural Mississippi. I mean, that is just absolutely incredible. And do you think I mean, growing up in the military, 11 schools in 12 years, right? Um, that's obviously it's all you knew, but it had to be really, really hard for a kid. Do you think that's shaped you in some way today? That jumping around. I mean, I'm curious, and if I'm too personal, please tell me. Do you crave routine or do you crave change, or neither?
Um, yeah, it's a combination of both. Like, you have two kids in the same house and they will go different directions. Like my brother's very introverted, he's a surgeon, he's in the military. He's been there, high school ROTC, college ROTC. The military has a med school. He went to that one. He's been all the way through. I told him never get out because you don't know anything else. Like literally your whole life is that kind of organization versus there's always the other kid. You have two kids, one is jumping off stuff and breaking arms and doing all that stuff and getting injured, not doing what they're supposed to do. That was kind of the other kid. That was kind of me. So I think I went the other way and kind of why I still chose the orthodontics. Obviously, it has the routine with it and the background's still there. I think I'm a fairly disciplined person in a lot of ways. But in a day to day life, I like to move and shake. I'm not going to be a person that's probably going to be the best to be saluting other people. I was probably not going to do that very well.
Yeah,
Just knowing my personality. And I knew that young, luckily. So it kind of definitely shapes you, but it brings that still appreciation for the military that I always have, certain structures. And probably if you talk to my staff, they're probably like, no, he still has some of that in him. Like in the morning, we'll still do jumping jacks and squats and, how I'd speak to them in a review. It's better, very matter of fact in the review setting. We have fun other ways. But when it comes to certain aspects of it, it's very, slotted and regimented there. So I guess I would say both, to kind of do a cop out answer, but that's probably what it is truly though. But probably less so than a lot of other military kids. It's like,
yeah,
the preacher's kids, they're always the ones that are
appreciate it.
rebelling, but you got
Always
two
trouble.
kids and that's just the way it shakes out. They
That's
probably, have some doubts, like, what is this kid going to end up doing?
You did okay. You did okay.
Yeah, but it turned out all right. I'm sure they even think like, "Oh, it turned out pretty good, better than we thought,"
Yeah, the ends
So it
justify the
worked out
means.
for them.
Right on. And so let's talk about your practices because I think there's some really cool stuff to talk about there. How many practices do you have right now in terms of locations?
Right now, I have 4 total practices. I have
Okay.
2 Jackson orthodontic practices that I go to. Those are only 2 practices that I go to. They're probably 6 minutes apart, or excuse me, 6 miles apart.
Okay.
So probably 15 minutes. A lot of our patients go to either one. Then I have a separate orthodontic office in a town a little further away, probably still only a half an hour away from us now. And I started my own pediatric dental practice too. I really wanted that challenge to see how that could work out. I have an in-house consultant. My wife's a pediatric dentist. She doesn't work in the practice that I own. That wouldn't work out. She has her own. But right now I have those 4. So 3 orthos and 1 pedo. That one really was really spurned by I needed a tenant next door. I built a building and I wanted a tenant next door. And my real estate man said, who would be the perfect tenant? I said, pediatric dentist would be the perfect tenant. Well, let's get one of those. And so as I was going through and thinking about that, I said, well, I would like to always do this my own. So started that one. It's probably 2 years going on now. I'm going well. Totally different world though. That I didn't understand as much as I thought I did. But that's kind of the challenge. And this stage of my career, that's also part of the fun.
Doing things that you could fail at, right? It keeps it going. And I'll tell you, I'll share something with you only, Alfred. Nobody else is listening, right? It's just you and me. Um, I started at age 55. I started doing jujitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I have to be honest, if I tell you, do I enjoy getting on the mat and competing? No, not at all. And I'm not talking about like at my gym or what have you. It's when I like to compete in organized events, right? I'm going to Vegas to go compete at the Worlds, even though I'm a white belt. But getting on that mat scares the ever living daylights out of me. I can't remember the last time I felt almost terror to my core for no good reason then when you get on that mat, it's like wrestling. There's two people, they call you on, and you go. And I'm getting like goosebumps thinking about it right now. It just makes me very uncomfortable. And so I was talking to my therapist about it. And I think this applies. The reason I'm telling you this story, I think this applies to you. And I think it applies to a large part of people who are our peers. I said to my therapist, I said, I need your help with something here because I'm usually a happy-go-lucky, thrilled kind of guy. I said, I don't know why I'm getting such dread about getting on the mat. The worst, I'm not going to get injured really. The worst that's going to happen is I'm going to lose, and it is what it is. But he said to me, he goes, when was the last time you failed miserably? I said, I don't know. I can't really think of the last time I failed miserably, like in something. He goes, I would contend that you took this on because you wanted a challenge that was going to take you out of your comfort zone and make you really uncomfortable. And I said, you know what? Probably makes a lot of sense. And as I thought it through, it's true, and it's true of so many of us in our profession that you you did well. You did well in dental school. You had to get into ortho. You've done well in ortho. You've started practices. You've been doing amazing. Starting a pedo practice probably, pushes you outside your comfort zone a little bit and makes you really uncomfortable at times. And again, before I turn it back to you, I'll say to everybody out there, I don't care if you're built like that or not. I think there's such incredible value in your life of taking on something that A, you're not so sure you can achieve it. B, you don't really know anything about it yet, right? You gotta acquire the knowledge to make it successful. And C, be out there a little bit and putting yourself out there. If you're an introvert, all the more so. But it feels to me like that's what you did with your pedo practice. No?
Yes, and I try to do that in the other spots of my life as well. But that's kind of how it went too. You get to 40 something, and you're like, I need a new challenge. Um, and you have to start doing things that you necessarily don't love. And that's a hard thing to think about. But even I think I heard a podcast, Adam Huberman podcast, and he mentioned that same thing. He said, well, it's actually a part of the brain. You have to push yourself to continue doing things you don't love. Like for me, I hate to run. I don't like, some people run. My buddy Chris Feldman, he runs for like hours. I'm like, I'm running and I don't like it. And people say, I see you running all the time. I'm like, no, every second that you see me running, I'm not enjoying this. I like to lift weights. I wrestled in high school, played football. I enjoy those kind of quick, explosive activities. But the monotony of doing that and the challenge, one, to show myself, also again to show my kids and my family as well that this is also something that I can tackle. And you can watch me fail at this. And failing is not the part; it's the resiliency. I'm just going
Yeah,
to keep going, and eventually I will figure it out. Same thing in the orthodontic school, any other time. But as we get older, I think you lose steam if you don't find those challenges
agree
to keep pushing
100%.
you. Like then you like living, but it's like I do kind of have this kind of figured out. And what's the next challenge? And that's why people probably have those back in the day call them the midlife crisis, where the guy got the Corvette and the earring and the other stuff. So
I drive a Corvette and I haven't eaten. No, I'm kidding.
no, I mean that. I may have some bad ankles from running too much recently, but short of that, I'm good.
My midlife crisis was going back to ortho school. Like that was like at 44, I went back to ortho, right? Like that was my midlife crisis in retrospect, but it wasn't really a crisis. But my question for you is your pedo practice. I want to get into this a little bit. You have your wife is pedodontist, right? Pediatric dentist. She knows what she's doing, so she can help you along, but she's not working it. Was there any point along the path where you regretted doing it? Like, oh God, what am I getting myself into? This is so dumb. I shouldn't be doing this. Or all along was it, I don't know this. I'm going to learn it, but I'm not succeeding right now. Or was it from day one? It was just a home run every time you touched anything there.
No, it was kind of the opposite, and it goes month to month. Like really it does.
Right.
Some months I'm like the king of the world. When you get the production numbers, the king of the world. Next
Yeah.
month I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And it's definitely a not a unique challenge, but having her there, I was living with a person that does very well at it. Not that you take it for granted that it's easy, but I've always something I wanted to do, and I always thought you should do it. It would be a good benefit to do in the community that I had. I thought it was going to be a big benefit as well. But also when I started, I knew I wasn't going to stop. So even when I had the hurdles, even when we had bumps, even having my associate doctors, they're like, this doesn't seem to really phase you. This is a problem that we're having today. But I'm like, well, that problem, we're going to keep going forward. Just like when I started my orthodontic practice, I just kept moving forward. And that's the same thing we'll do. We're going to keep doing that. And all you have to do is not quit to be successful, really. It's just whoever quits first is the person that's not successful. So I'm just going to keep pushing through it. But there's definitely days you're like, I don't really need this. I'm doing pretty well. Probably like that second before you get on the jujitsu mat, right? It's like, I don't really need to do this again. But you
Yeah,
go and do it anyway. And each day that you do, each day you get done, you feel something in you, that sense of pride, sense of accomplishment, and getting over that challenge that's there in front of you.
I agree. And I'll be honest, when I'm at the gym training with people, I love it. Right? It's fun. It's great. You wrestled, which is as close as you're going to get to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Um, by the way, I lost my first match from an arm drag. Guy took my back.
Oh, yeah.
Classic wrestling move. He was a
Does
wrestler with cauliflower ears, and I was like, "What the hell just happened?"
happen. Yeah.
He didn't submit me. I went 5 minutes with a back take and a choke going on, but like he grabbed my hand and dragged me, like threw me on the ground, took my back. I was like, "What the hell just happened?" Like we didn't learn this in jiu-jitsu.
No.
But someone told me later, he goes like, "That is classic wrestling move right there." This guy must have been. He came up from Mexico to wrestle, and I was like, "A luchador." I got my ass handed to me. But when I step on that mat, I truly have dread, fear, not being hurt, but of failing. And I got to tell you, it's arguably my least favorite feeling in the world is when I've only done one competition, formal competition in Austin. But when I stand on the edge of that mat and you're waiting for the ref to call you on, that is my least comfortable place on planet Earth to be. I'm like right now, I can feel my heart racing just thinking about it because I don't know why. I'm trying to figure it out. But I feel like most alive at that moment, right? And what's the worst that happens, right? But I think we need to continue pushing ourselves. And I want to ask you about your pedo practice. Is it paying off, right? I assume it's great to have a tenant, but you're
Yeah.
paying yourself as your tenant
Yep.
or your corporation is. Is it, we all hear the stories about having a pedo next door. Is it paying dividends for your ortho practice yet? Because I've been told and we experienced when you have a pedo practice that opens up next door to you, you really don't see any patients who are ready for ortho for at least 3 to 5 years, at least our experience, because everybody in the community who already has a pediatric dentist, the younger siblings are going to that pediatric. But when somebody's new who has a young 3, 4, 5-year-old and they don't have anybody else in the pedo practice, then they come to the new pedo practice. But they're 4 years old, they're 5 years old. There really aren't that many to treat. Is that what you're experiencing, or is your experience a little different?
No, that's exactly how it's going. First, if somebody thought about going into it, they need to go into it thinking of it as a separate entity. Sometimes people think of it like a feeder program. It's
Right.
not going to work out that way. And I knew that because my wife had a pedo practice close to one of my other practices. And the average pedo patient is 3 years old. Pedo new patient, excuse me. The average
Right.
pediatric dental new patient is 3 years old. So it's going to be a long time before you're getting any return on that from an orthodontic side of it.
Yeah.
The practice in itself will do fine and make its own money, slow going like any other startup. But getting a direct return on the ortho side, unless you love space maintainers and sending out extractions for primary canines, that's probably the biggest thing that you're doing right now at this stage of it. A lot of times I'm referring back to them actually. A person may come to me, braces transfer from somewhere else, and I have to tell them, hey, you need a person? We have one next door. Kid hasn't had a cleaning. You're not ready for braces, but we can refer you over here. But if you're going into it thinking that'd be great to have, I even remember from my wife's experience, or my experience with my wife being a pediatric dentist as well, that it doesn't feed like that. It doesn't flow as quickly and easy as people think. And a lot of times those kids almost start aging out. The 14-year-old doesn't necessarily even love the pediatric practice. The 14-year-old these days may be 6'2", legs hanging off the back of it. They don't want the aquarium theme roomed anymore.
Yeah.
So obviously we didn't build it like that, but still, it doesn't flow that way when you go into it. You have to think of that entity as being its own entity, and any referrals that you may get is just a plus.
Yeah,
So
I want to make money from my pedo practice, period.
yeah.
I want to have a profitable pedo practice. And if it sends me patients to my ortho practice, well, awesome. That's gravy. But I'm building a business for the sake of building a business. It could as easily been a donut shop. It could easily be a bagel shop. It could be anything, but you're building a separate business because I guess you figured pedo better than a bagel shop.
Yes, that and the control, really the kind of control of it, and long term, what's it going to be? And when I sell my practice, when I sell this building, who's a stable tenant? Who would I want in there? That's kind of what it broke down to. Because at any different state, it's not. We don't have the same brand at all. So at some point, I could sell that practice when I, obviously we'll have to sell that practice at some point, like we all will. So I have to sell that practice at some point, and I wanted it to be something to stand alone and long term that could be there. And I
Right.
felt it fit a niche in our community. We had some practices that were more Medicaid focused, and then we had some that were more boutique focused, almost all fee for service. I thought there was a niche in between there, of what I would call the middle class. That was at least the way I thought of it. And I thought there was a niche and a void actually there. That's kind of how it sparked and started. I thought we needed one.
Right on.
And so it was kind of morphed from there. But yes, when you go into it, think of it just like that. Just like you started your ortho practice. It's going to start very slow the same way. You're going to have the same problems. And they don't have the ability to hit as many home runs as we do. They can't
Right.
do a poor marketing job, get 3 people in, and these 3 people have to start, and you get $15,000 in production, right? Three
Yeah.
people come in, they need a pedo cleaning, $120.
Right. Yeah.
It takes a while. It's not the same,
No,
So,
I hear you on that.
but I think some people think it's quicker and easier than it is. And from the outside looking in, it always feels that way.
And before we move on to the next topic, real quick, if someone was listening to you and going, I want to build my own pedo practice, aside from the great advice you gave, which is don't use this as just a feeder to your ortho practice because you'll be sorely, saddened. What are other two pieces of information, if you have them, that you've learned along the way that you'd suggest to somebody who's thinking of doing this?
An orthodontist thinking of opening their own pediatric
Yeah,
spot.
exactly.
I would just make sure they go into it. We already said it with the right mindset. Trying to find a doctor that wants to be there long term is also going to be difficult. So that's something that they have to try to find. See if they have common ground on that. You may have to offer them a portion of a partnership if you would like to do that. If not, know going into it that you're going to probably pay them more upfront than you pay your normal orthodontic associate as well.
Right.
And that you're going to have to market a little bit different too. So going to it knowing that this is, but also knowing it's going to be a fun journey too. It's like it's fun. Sometimes I can walk over there, this 3-year-old in a Batman suit, about to get his teeth clean. It's a different light. Some days I don't go over there when I hear a lot of screaming. I'm like, ooh, let me close this door. But short of that, it's still a different energy, and I really enjoy it.
Nice.
But I think an orthodontist wanting to do it, the first thought is going to be the referrals, and they need to soon cancel that out because it may not exist. And remember, once you open that spot next door, your other pediatric referrals will go down drastically.
Yeah. And I guess the last question I have for you on this, because I could talk about this all day long, but have you ever considered, or would you ever consider as it grows, to ever bringing them both under the same roof as an ortho and pedo practice? Or because you want to be able to sell it separately, you're never going to combine them together?
Yeah, they'll never be combined. Even when me and my wife started and we were looking for places, I knew we wouldn't even combine our practices. One, I think the flow of it isn't as organized. Outside referrals obviously will take a hit, of course, but me long term exit strategy, whatever that looks like, bringing in a partner, not a partner, selling it, it complicates things
Right.
as well. So I think having two separate entities is best. The practices of ours aren't connected at all. So I mean, they're connected through a wall, but short of that, they're not really connected. So I think that's the way I would always do it.
Okay.
Other people would do it. If you had and there's plenty of people, depending on your personality too. There's plenty of people that go on and want to partner full time, that they want to do this together, and it's probably much easier actually because someone's truly committed if they're actually a pediatric dental partner of yours, that you guys are running the business together. But I know myself, it would never be under the same roof because I also like to make decisions that I know can't ultimately hurt the golden goose. I want to make sure that also as well, if it doesn't go good and it's challenges, because not every challenge that we talked about, you're not going to win them all. So let's say this one doesn't go good and it fails. It's still short of me closing down the doors. There's no problem that I would have on my orthodontic side, my main life stream. I would not have that problem at all. I could drop that practice off without any problems.
Right on. Yeah, it sounds like you're doing some cool stuff, man. It's awesome. Let's move over into one of the last things I want to talk about, which is you have a very interesting, and I was going to mention it when you talked about your military, growing up background. You've got a very interesting hierarchical nature to your practice, right? You don't have I would say, I would contend the average practice has the doctor as the CEO, the CFO, the CTO, the CMO, right? The COO, all right, and every other C-suite hat that needs to be worn. maybe some people like Ben Fishbein, for instance, is a great example. They get outside that comfort zone a little bit because they understand it and they see it, and they bring in an organizational hierarchy of assistants or team leaders or managers. You've taken it a step further and done something a little bit different. You mind talking about that?
Yeah, so someone like Ben who's doing it, I mean, to the infant degree. Some of mine came when I started thinking about, the DSO sell or not sell, how that was going. One thing that I noticed when they would approach me is like they had a lot more structure than I had. I didn't have the same level of structure in my practice. So it was like you said, it was me, and then everything just kind of flowed down from that, like almost like a pyramid area, right? So everything just kind of flowed from doc. If doctor wasn't here, things didn't get done. So I really wanted to change that and challenge anyone else to also change that. Is so for me, I have an executive administrator, then I have a team of financial people, marketing person, and then separate leaders under that umbrella. I have a total separate company that is just not doctor facing at all. So when you come to the clinic, you don't even know these other people necessarily exist, but they do a lot of the actual running of the practice. That helps me out from a lifestyle standpoint. I think that helps the practice grow with where it's grown now. I know people sometimes talk about where they want the practices to grow, but that's allowed me to get there. So executive administrator, we have two financial people. One of those financial people oversees all four practices, just doing audits at different times. Whole marketing person that markets for all four of those practices as well. My phones aren't answered at the front desk at all. So, not in a call center, but I have other people that handle Weave, which is what we use. They make appointments, they do all that stuff. That they're all housed in a separate suite that we have that's not even in our office. It's across the hall, but still it's not in our office.
So at what point would you recommend someone do this, right? Like you're a new doc, you just opened your own practice. You've got your stellar single employee who answers the phones and comes back and helps you in clinic. I think we've all been there at one point in our lives. And the phone rings and you stand next to them to listen. Is it a new patient? Those are some of my worst and best days ever. Like you said, 3 new patients scheduled that month. You made $15,000. Like, wow, man, we killed it. I'm on pace for 180,000 this year. And there's many people listening who probably right at that stage are going to get there, and we've all been there. But, I think one of the biggest mistakes I see out there is people, for a whole variety of reasons, they want to bring these people in too soon, right? Their practice is doing $1 million a year, $1.5 million a year. It's barely a single doctor practice. And they're talking about, I'm going to bring in I'm going to bring in a sorry, not a doctor. I'm going to bring somebody in who's an MBA, or I'm going to bring in somebody, I'm going to turn my office manager into a director of operations, and suddenly start paying them 6 figures or close to it. And they're going to help me grow my practice. Now, I would say that's the wrong attitude. If you think bringing these people in is going to grow your practice, my experience would say you have it backwards. Grow your practice and bring them in to make your life easier, as opposed to, I need to get busier, so I'm going to bring other people in to do the job that really I'm the only one who can do it. What are your thoughts on that?
It's probably somewhere in the middle. I just read a book, and I read it multiple times actually, a book called Buy Back Your Time. So there's certain things that you can do as the doctor that only you can do.
Right.
And you want to focus on those. So I brought the people in too late. I should have done it earlier. Not obviously from a scratch practice, but knowing day one, even if you're only going to have one practice, but there's certain things on a level that you want a certain structure you can have. You may not need as many people as I have. We have a team of 28 now. You don't need that many people.
You have 28 people behind the scenes only.
No. That's a no.
I was like, dude,
I have 30 total employees. No way. No,
you're bigger than some of the OSOs that are out there.
All my employees together, there's that many of them.
Yeah, and you're sitting here telling me how Ben Fishbein killed it. I'm like, this dude's got 28 behind the scenes.
There's 4 over there.
Okay.
No, there's 4. No.
Awesome.
No, but I think some people probably do it too late because there's a balance depending on your personality. Yes, there's that startup stage where you can do a lot, but sometimes just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I agree.
That's one part. And depending on your personality, it may not be allowing you to grow further because you may have stressors that you're dealing with. Oh my gosh, the plumber, I may call the plumber, so whatever it is, all these different tasks that you can eliminate. So for me, I waited too long. I got to, when I got past 2 practices and I wanted a third, that's when I started thinking about it. And really kind of self-scouting myself, saying, what am I deficient at? everybody has to ask me the questions. Even today, I'm still a bottleneck in my own practice in some ways.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't want that to be the case or be the limiting factor. So I wouldn't do it at the beginning, but I would have the vision in mind, and be looking for the team members to slowly grow that structure. Even if you wrote it down on some type of 10-year plan, knowing that certain metrics and certain stressors, I am going to move this direction. I
Yeah.
think it would help out a lot. And I wouldn't go the route of a lot of people go, turning your highest front desk person into your future office manager. That's not the
Take your
move that I'm
best
talking
team
about.
player and ruin their job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's arguably one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is I have this great TC who's killing it. He or she has got a 90% conversion rate. They're amazing. They're so smart. They're great. I'm going to turn them into my director of operations. No, you got a
Yeah.
90% case acceptance rate. Pay them more, keep them in the same job, keep them happy, and keep killing it and get the right person. And, I love what you say because you're basically, it's that book, what got you here won't get you there, right? It's the same thing. Yeah, you killed yourself to get yourself to 2 practices, maybe doing 2, 3, 5, 7, $10 million, whatever your numbers are, your numbers. But don't believe for a second, and this is the wisdom of what you just said, is don't believe for a second that you sheer force, your power of what you got you here is going to get you to that next thing. Because just like your wrestling background, yeah, you could outmuscle the person you just beat, but the next one coming in is super fast. You're going to change your game because if you play that same game, you're going to get taken to the mat. And the same thing when you have 2 practices doing 3 million, 4 million, whatever the number is, now all of a sudden scale becomes an issue. Now all of a sudden you got to start doing things. And if you think you're not ready to get what Alfred is talking about, my suggestion out there is you've seen at least 3 podcasts I've done or listened to them about how to get a virtual assistant, right? You don't need to go all in and go get yourself a CEO or COO or whatever you want to get. Hire a virtual assisting agency. It's reversible. It's cheap. And yeah, call the plumber. Hey, by the way, Susie, I got you 10 hours a week. I just need you to run tasks for me. Call my doctor, schedule an appointment for me. Call the plumber. Here's the problem we're having. And if you get the right VA, they are smart people. It's not like delegating to your worst assistant. This is delegating to people who can, literally say, they'll ask you, what's wrong with the pipe? What do you need? When do you need it fixed by? What, blah, blah, blah. Good, I'm on it. And then it's done. It's
Yeah.
off your plate. And so, yeah, I love what you're talking about here, Alfred, and I love what you're doing. And you're such a shining star in our profession. One day, I'm going to get you to lecture at Orthopreneurs Summit. One time, just so people know, I want to say this out loud because I respect and love you a ton. People come up to me all the time and say, Glenn, why don't you get so-and-so to speak at Summit? Why don't you get this person? Or you don't have enough men, or you don't have enough minorities, you don't have enough women, you don't have enough whatever. And I say to them, you don't understand how many people I ask who you've asked for to speak at Summit, but these people have lives. They have things in their sort of solar system that are important to them. And just because I'm asking them to speak at Summit doesn't mean that they should put the rest of their life on hold to spend the many, many hours it takes to create a really good presentation and have to deal with traveling and what have you. So you're one of those guys out there I completely respect. You haven't said yes yet. And I don't give you a hard time about it because I respect you and the things you're doing are remarkable. But maybe, just maybe one day,
Yeah, I'm sure.
maybe I'll host a summit in Charlotte, North Carolina.
I won't have any. No, I mean, I think you probably asked me probably 3 separate times. And each time I tell them, I'm going to do it. But also along the same lines that we were talking about before, whenever you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else.
Exactly.
And now my kids are 7th grade, 5th grade, kindergarten, the practices we talked about. I like to do a lot of community service. And as much as I want to do it, I always thought I was going to be a teacher, actually. I always thought I was going to teach ortho. That was kind of my whole, like, I know everyone says that when they go to interview, but I was really like, I'm going to be one of the faculty members. But as I got older, I'm like, I can't take those hours away from the family, or I don't want to.
Right.
I don't want to do those hours because I want to do the best I can. If I go in and I speak, I'm not going behind the lineup that you have. I can't go half stepping in there. Like, there's no way, that's like an all-star team anyway. So it'd be just a privilege to be asked in the first place, to even be thought of in the same light. But I know if I'm going like, no, I gotta, these guys coming out with smoke and, they might be flying out by the time I'm done. So,
I'm going to
but
keep
all great
asking,
guys
Alfred.
have great knowledge. And it's a privilege to ask. And I would challenge probably even myself to say, no, go and tackle that challenge again. I've spoken before, but going out there again, I think it would probably be something I want to do. Got my youngest in kindergarten now, so it might truly be something I can do. Yeah.
2025 is calling, man. I'm just telling you, Caesar's
That's
Palace,
Vegas.
Las Vegas.
I will be there for that one for sure. I probably won't
Yeah,
be speaking, but I will be there for that one.
that's our first.
Another.
That's our first one. It's our first one that's got clinical.
Yeah.
So, I got Stu Frost and Maz Moshiri and, I Tom Pitts and Ron Ronconi, and it's going to clinical and management at the same time. And it's the first one we've ever done that has 4 breakout tracks in the afternoon each day. So like you can jump in and out of health and wellness, which I know you'll love, because I got some people who are going to fire at the health and longevity, but overhead control, growing your practice and all that stuff. So when you're ready, man, you could talk on any of those things and kill it. And so the time always goes so fast when you're talking to somebody you enjoy talking to. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today, Alfred, and looking forward to continuing some really fun conversations together.
Thank you, Glenn, for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor. You're doing great things. It fills a large void in the profession as well.
Thank
And
you.
a lot of times it's probably hard to put yourself out there. You stand in the front line, you're going to get all the arrows, good and bad.
Yeah.
Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep pushing it forward because the things that you're doing are necessary. And as the people grow, you're still allowing that connectivity that we talked about from Meeting of the Minds or MKS or any other of the great other meetings out there. What you're doing is still trying to push the envelope on doing it too is great.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate you a ton, and can't wait till we connect again.
All right. Have a great day, man.
Take care.